Why is here a puff pastry sheet? Well, I'm going to make brachial plexus out of the puff pastry for those who never had the chance to dissect brachial plexus or just want to have a look at brachial plexus. But before we look at brachial plexus, I want to describe the arm and forearm because one of the very important functions of brachial plexus is to innervate the muscles of arm and forearm. So, this is the arm and this is the forearm. Although in layman's term we call the whole thing arm, but in medicine we will divide it into arm and forearm. And this side would be the anterior side because this is the anatomical position. So the part facing the front in anatomical position would be called the anterior side, and the part at the back would be called the posterior side. This side is called the medial side because the medial side is the part that's closest to the center of the body, whereas this part would be called the lateral side because lateral side is the one that's furthest from the center of the body. Another two terms I want to clarify is radial and ulnar side because we use it a lot in describing forearm. In forearm, there's actually two bones. One is the radius and one is the ulna. So naturally, ulnar side is the one that's around the ulnar bone, and the radial side is the one that's around the radial bone. Basically, the ulnar side is the same as medial side, and the radial side is same as the lateral side. Another thing, the anterior muscles is actually the one that's involved in flexion, whereas the posterior muscles, like here, is the one that's involved in extension. So now that we have these terms clarified, let's go back to our puff pastry and get crafting some nerves. Now, let's make ourselves some nerves first. I'm cutting this diagonally so that we get long, narrow nerves. Brachial plexus is made of the ventral rami of spinal nerves from C5 to T1. Why do I need to specify that it's from ventral rami? Because the posterior rami of the spinal nerve actually goes to innervate the extensor muscles of our back, so it's not very relevant here. What happens to these? Oh, also we would call them root of the brachial plexus. What happens to these spinal nerves is that they join together to form trunks. The roots of C5 and C6 joins together to form the upper trunk. The root of C7 just kind of continues by itself to become the middle trunk. And then the roots of C8 and T1 joins together to form the lower trunk. Now, what happens after it forms the trunk is that it divides again into divisions. Now, this part is important because it's also the focus of our video here. Basically, it becomes anterior and posterior divisions. Every trunk becomes anterior and posterior divisions. Here. And since these are already kind of apart, I'll just split it. And the anterior divisions are actually the ones that go to innervate the anterior muscles of the anterior compartment of the arm and forearm. And the posterior division go on to innervate the muscles at the posterior compartment of arm and forearm. And we shall see this a bit later as well. Because it's so important, I'm gonna label these in colors. So I'm gonna label the anterior division brown, and I'll label the posterior division green. these divisions do is that they form the cords, the anterior divisions of the upper trunk and the middle trunk joins together and forms the lateral cord. And these are made from nerve roots of C5, 6, 7. The anterior division of the C8 stays by itself to form the medial cord. So lateral cord, medial cord. And all the posterior divisions of upper, middle, and lower trunk joins together. They're all green to form the posterior cord. And you might wonder why this is called lateral, posterior, and medial. Well, it's actually in relation to the axillary artery, because the axillary artery runs something like that. So this is like lateral to the axillary artery, medial to axillary artery. Now is the time for the branches. From the brachial plexus emerges 5 very important terminal branches. And these branches go on to innervate the muscles of the forearm, arm, hand, and also shoulder. Let's first look at the terminal branches that emerge from the anterior divisions. So from the lateral cord, we get a branch that becomes the musculocutaneous nerve. And this branch would actually go on to join this little guy. But first, like this one here, it also branches off, and this branch becomes the ulnar nerve. So musculocutaneous ulnar. And these two will join together and become the median nerve. So here is our 3 terminal branches from the anterior divisions. So as you can see, they're all brown. Now, the posterior division gives rise to 2 important nerves. One is the axillary. Okay, I'll just tear it because I don't have any more board space to cut. One is the axillary, and the other is radial. Now, I'll talk you through which muscles each of these terminal branches innervate. So the musculocutaneous comes from the anterior division. So it's not a surprise that it goes to innervate the anterior compartment of the arm. The median nerve is also from anterior division, and it goes to innervate the muscles of the anterior compartment of the forearm, except 1.5 muscles that are on the ulnar side of the forearm. So those muscles are the flexor carpi ulnaris and the ulnar half or the medial half of flexor digitorum profundus. So the ulnar nerve will go on to innervate the anterior muscles of anterior compartment of the forearm, but only 1.5 muscles. And those muscles are the flexor carpi ulnaris and the ulnar half of the flexor digitorum profundus. More importantly, ulnar nerve innervates a lot of the intrinsic muscles of the hands. Median nerve also innervates some of the intrinsic muscles of the hand, but it's only the thinner muscles and the first 2 lumbricals. Now, let's go on to nerves of the posterior division. So, our green nerves. First off, we have the radial nerve, and it's a very important nerve because it innervates all of the muscles of the posterior compartment of arm, and forearm. So that's a lot of muscles, but at the same time, there's only two muscles in the posterior compartment of the arm, which are the anconeus and the triceps brachii. So it's actually not that many to remember, but yeah, it's true. There's a lot of muscles in the posterior compartment of the forearm because you've got to extend both the wrist and the fingers. Now the axillary nerve doesn't actually go to innervate the muscles of arm or forearm, but it's also kind of easy to remember what it innervates because it innervates a muscle called teres minor, which is at the back. So it makes sense. The nerve at the posterior division that comes out from posterior innervation innervates something that's at the back. Another muscle, and this is a more important one, is the deltoid muscle, and it's a big muscle at the shoulder, and that's also innervated by the axillary nerve. So here is our brachial plexus from puff pastry sheet. So now what should I do with it? Well, thankfully I have made an apple pie this morning, so I would be putting this brachial plexus on my apple pie so that we have a nice lace thing on our apple pie. So wait for me till I fetch my apple pie. So here's my half-made apple pie. And now I'll put the lace coverings on it. Let's see how I manage this. It's gonna be very awkward. Anyways, let's see if I can maintain the shape. Maybe not. Okay. This is 15 minutes after baking and the pie is done. Pie. It actually looks really pretty because you got some brown, some green. Okay, I'm gonna cut it. How should I cut it? Wait. Whoa, it's so hard. Whoa, it's so crunchy. Okay. I'll cut one slice out first. I'm not the best one for cutting pies, but yay! I can get it out. Dun, dun, dun. Ta-da! Yay! This is my apple pie. Should I eat it then? Okay. Okay, I don't know how to eat. I'll try the puff pastry as well. This is the end of my video. Thank you for watching. And if you're curious, I can link my apple pie recipe in the comment section, in the description section, because I used someone else's recipe. Thank you.